The day I walked out of my father's office for the last time, I realized something terrifying. I had no home to go back to. I had spent 26 years living under his rules, under his eyes, in a house that gleamed like a jewel but felt more like a prison. Every word I said, every step I took, every dream I even whispered to myself was catalogued, measured, and judged by my father, Richard Harrington, CEO of Harrington Enterprises. To him, nothing was ever good enough, except the life he planned for me. Peyton, a Harrington never settles for second best, he would remind me, straightening his crisp navy suit with military precision. Those words, meant to instill pride, often left me gasping under the weight of expectation. Our Newport Beach home, sprawling across the cliffs with panoramic views of the ocean, had 21 rooms filled with designer furniture, artwork I didn't understand, and staff who seemed more like witnesses than family. It was beautiful, yes, but suffocating. Every step I took felt choreographed, rehearsed, and heavily supervised. By the time I graduated from a top business school and became a junior executive at Harrington Enterprises, my life was a perfect reflection of my father's blueprint. And my engagement, Aidan Whitman, heir to Whitman Technologies, was the man my father had chosen for me before I even met him. Our wedding would have been the social event of the year, a celebration of merging empires, power, and prestige. There was only one problem. I wasn't in love with Aidan. Not even close. I met Mateo Carter on an ordinary Thursday morning, though nothing about that day would ever feel ordinary again. My sleek black sedan had stalled on a rainy street in Costa Mesa, and I was stranded, soaked, and furious. That's when he showed up in a battered pickup, wearing oil-stained jeans and a grin that made me forget I had a trust fund bigger than most people's lifetimes. "Looks like your timing belt shot," he said casually, wiping his hands on a rag. "I can fix it, but it'll take a few hours." There was something about the way he looked at me, not with judgment, not with awe at my clothes or car, but with quiet honesty. His brown eyes met mine without pretense, and for reasons I couldn't explain, I agreed to wait at his tiny garage rather than call a tow or an Uber. Over vending machine coffee that tasted like wet cardboard, Mateo shared his story. He had worked his way through engineering school, graduating at the top of his class. But instead of a corporate career, he chose to work with his hands, solving problems, fixing things, and creating solutions that mattered. "Life's too short to spend it doing something just because it looks good on paper," he said, smiling like he'd just handed me a secret map to happiness. For the first time in my life, someone put into words exactly what I'd been feeling but never dared to voice. One coffee turned into lunch, then dinner, then a series of stolen moments whenever I could escape my gilded cage. Mateo never asked about my family fortune, never tried to impress me with fancy restaurants or gifts. Instead, he showed me laughter I'd forgotten, drives along the coast in his pickup, picnics in hidden parks, and the simple joy of being fully, completely myself. For 6 months, I lived a double life. By day, I was the Harrington heir, the obedient daughter, the perfect fiancée. By night, I was Peyton, the girl who could love freely, who could breathe, who could be happy without asking permission. The breaking point came at a charity gala at our home. Aidan droned on about merger strategies to anyone who would listen, and my mother, ever the social conductor, paraded me around like a prize thoroughbred. "Peyton will be taking over the East Coast operations after the wedding," she boasted to a group of wealthy donors. Every word felt like a nail in my chest. I fled to the garden, my trembling fingers dialing Mateo's number. "I can't do this anymore," I whispered, tears streaming. "I can't marry Aidan. I can't be who they want me to be." There was a pause on the other end, then a calm, steady voice. "Then don't. Be who you are." That's the person I fell in love with. That night, as the rain-slicked garden glistened under the lights of our mansion, I made a choice I didn't know I was strong enough to make. A choice that would change everything. The morning after the gala, the mansion felt colder than usual. The chandeliers sparkled, the marble floors gleamed, but I felt like a ghost wandering through someone else's life. My father was already in his study, reviewing quarterly reports with that piercing intensity one had known all my life. I took a deep breath, my hand trembling over the doorknob, and stepped inside. "Daddy," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "I need to tell you something." His eyes lifted slowly, sharp and calculating. "Go on," he said, the single word heavy with expectation. I can't marry Aiden," I said, the words tasting foreign on my tongue. "I'm in love with someone else." The explosion that followed was nearly physical. My father's face turned a deep shade of purple, his fist slammed into the mahogany desk, and the air around us seemed to vibrate with fury. You're throwing away everything we've built for you. Everything we've worked for," he roared. "I know," I whispered, fighting the panic that rose in my chest. "But I need to choose my life, not the one you planned for me." He bellowed my worst fear aloud. "You will marry Aiden as planned, or you forget about the trust fund, your position at the company, everything. Is that clear?" It was clear. And yet, I had never felt more certain of anything. I squared my shoulders. Crystal clear. Goodbye, Daddy. Leaving that office felt like walking through fire. My mother's tears stung my eyes, her quiet sobs almost more painful than my father's rage. The staff whispered, shocked, confused. I packed a small bag, leaving behind the life that had been meticulously curated for me since birth. Mateo was waiting outside his small apartment when I arrived. His smile faltered as he saw my tear-streaked face. "Peyton, what happened?" "I chose to finally start my life," I said, my voice raw but resolute. "I'm done living by someone else's rules." His hand trembled slightly as he reached for mine. "I can't let you throw away your life for me," he said. But I silenced him with a kiss. "I'm not giving up my life, Mateo. I'm finally starting it." The months that followed were humbling. Moving into his one-bedroom apartment meant learning how to live without endless resources. I took a job as an entry-level consultant at a small firm. We clipped coupons, counted every dollar, and sometimes went without luxuries I had always taken for granted. But for the first time, every moment felt earned. Every laugh, every shared meal, every late-night conversation mattered because it was ours, not dictated by wealth, image, or expectation. Meanwhile, my parents' attempts to pull me back never ceased. My accounts were frozen, credit cards canceled, even attempts to sabotage my new job surfaced in whispers. Every phone call, every email from them reminded me of what I had left behind. And yet, with every obstacle, Mateo and I grew stronger together. Every challenge was a test we passed hand in hand, our love deepening in ways I had never imagined possible. When we finally decided to marry, we did it the only way that made sense, quietly, simply in a local botanical garden. No designer gowns, no socialites, no cameras. Just a handful of friends, the scent of blooming flowers, and the person who had made me believe in myself again. On the morning of our wedding, a message arrived from my mother. "Your father and I will be attending. One last chance to fix this mistake." My heart raced. Mateo squeezed my hand. "It's your choice, love. Whatever you want." I looked at him, standing there in his rented suit, smiling and at ease, completely at home in a world I had spent years trying to escape. And I thought about my parents, trapped in theirs, obsessed with wealth and appearances. The answer came without hesitation. I wanted them there, yes, but only if they could accept me on my terms. Only if they could love me for who I am, not the life they dreamed I would live. Later that evening, during our intimate garden reception, my parents arrived. My mother's voice trembled as she pleaded, "It's not too late, Peyton. Aiden would still take you back. Think about what you're throwing away." My father's tone was harsher, sharper. "Stay with this man, and you'll never see a penny of your inheritance. Is that what you want?" I turned to Mateo, who was laughing with our friends, completely at ease. And I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. Nothing else mattered. Not money, not status, not fear. "What I want," I said firmly, feeling my voice steady with conviction, "is to be happy. Mateo makes me happy. If you can't understand that, then maybe we don't need your money or your approval in our lives." The silence that followed was almost holy. My father's face flushed a dangerous shade of purple again. My mother hesitated, and somewhere in the distance, Aiden seemed to shrink into the shadows, realizing he was irrelevant in this story. Mateo slid an arm around my waist, a quiet anchor in a world that had tried so hard to shake me. I leaned into him, watching my past walk away, and for the first time, I felt truly free. Life, after leaving the Harrington mansion, was nothing like I expected. I had traded crystal chandeliers for flickering fluorescent lights, marble floors for scratched linoleum, and gourmet meals for whatever we could throw together in Mateo's tiny kitchen. And yet somehow, it felt right. There were nights when I lay awake in our cramped apartment, the hum of the city outside our window, and felt a gnawing uncertainty creep in. What if I had made a mistake? What if I had been too impulsive, too naive? My parents' words still echoed in my mind. "You're throwing away everything we've built for you." Some days, I missed the effortless wealth, the status, even the structure. At the mansion, life had been predictable. Here, every dollar had to be earned, every decision deliberate. I learned quickly that freedom comes with responsibility. I had to fight for every client at my consulting firm, budget every grocery run, and navigate the everyday stresses of a life stripped of privilege. Mateo, of course, handled it all with patience I didn't deserve. He worked long hours at his garage, his hands covered in grease, yet never lost his smile. He'd come home exhausted, and we'd collapse on the sofa together, sharing a simple meal or a cup of lukewarm tea. He never complained, never made me feel guilty for the sacrifices I had to make, and in that quiet way, he taught me more about strength and resilience than all the lectures my father had ever given me. And still, there were moments of doubt. A misplaced bill could send me spiraling. A difficult client could make me question my decision. And then there was the sting of loneliness, the absence of my family in the small, unfamiliar world we were building. Birthdays passed without calls, holidays were spent with just the two of us, and I realized just how deeply I had relied on my parents' approval for my sense of worth. One rainy evening, curled up on our tiny couch while Mateo tinkered under a car in the garage below, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Mateo," I whispered, my voice trembling, "do you ever feel like we've made a mistake? Like maybe we're too small, too ordinary?" He paused, wiping his hands on a rag, and looked up at me. "Peyton, look at me," he said softly. "Do you love this life?" I hesitated. The apartment was modest, the furniture mismatched, the budget tight, but the answer came without question. "Yes," I admitted. "I love it. I love us." He smiled, a slow, gentle smile that seemed to erase every fear. "Then we're doing exactly what we're supposed to." It was moments like this that reminded me why I had left everything behind. Love, I realized, wasn't about wealth, about status, about the perfect facade. It was about being seen, truly seen, and being valued for who you were, not what you could bring to someone else's table. Still, life tested us. My parents didn't give up. My father sent legal threats, freezing bank accounts and credit lines. My mother sent guilt-laden letters, hinting at disappointment, longing, and shame. And sometimes, even Mateo seemed distant, preoccupied with mysterious late-night phone calls and trips that didn't quite add up. My heart would clench with fear. What if this is history repeating itself? What if I've traded one kind of loss for another? But even in the quiet, tension-filled moments, I learned to trust in the foundation we had built together. Mateo's laughter in our cramped kitchen, the way he held my hand as we walked down the street carrying grocery bags, the way he never once judged my mistakes, these were the proof that life didn't have to be perfect to be real. It was during these months that I understood something crucial. Happiness doesn't come from wealth, inheritance, or social approval. It comes from authenticity, from the courage to choose yourself, and from loving someone who chooses you back, every day. By the time our simple garden wedding arrived, I was no longer afraid. I had confronted fear, walked away from control, and embraced a life that demanded work, patience, and devotion, but gave back infinitely more than any mansion ever could. Standing there in my plain white dress, hands wrapped around Mateo's, surrounded by only those who truly mattered, I felt a freedom I had never known. The hard part wasn't just leaving my family. It was learning to live in a life where every decision counted, where love, patience, and trust were the currency that really mattered. And in that struggle, I discovered something I hadn't realized in all my years of privilege. The quiet victories of ordinary life can be more profound than the loud applause of the elite. It started like any other Friday evening. I left my consulting job early, planning to surprise Mateo with takeout from our favorite Thai place. But when I stepped into our apartment, it was empty. The faint scent of soy sauce lingered, but Mateo was nowhere in sight. A hastily scribbled note lay on the counter. Working late at the garage. Love you. Normally, this wouldn't have worried me. Mateo often stayed late, but something felt off. Lately, his phone calls had been cryptic, his evenings long and unexplained. A knot formed in my stomach. My mind raced through worst-case scenarios. Has something happened? Is this the moment I lose him too? I grabbed the food, determined to check on him, and drove to the garage. The street was quiet, the neon lights of his shop casting long shadows. But the usual warmth, the smell of oil and rubber, the familiar hum of engines, none of it was there. The garage was dark, abandoned, as if it had never existed. Panic clawed at me. I called his number. Straight to voicemail. Then, a text came from an unknown number. Mrs. Carter, please come to 1875 Highland Avenue immediately. Highland Avenue? The industrial district? My heart lurched. I typed the address into my GPS, hands trembling, and drove through the darkening city, imagining every worst-case scenario. Was he hurt? Arrested? Gone forever? The GPS led me to a massive, modern building with sleek glass walls that gleamed under the streetlights. Security gates opened automatically as I approached, and a uniformed guard directed me to an elevator marked executive. My pulse raced. Take the executive elevator to the top floor, please, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The doors opened into a stunning office suite, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the city skyline. And there he was, Mateo, standing behind a glass desk. But it wasn't the Mateo I knew. Gone were the oil stains, the worn jeans, the humble garage demeanor. He wore an impeccably tailored suit, sharp, commanding, confident. Peyton, he said softly, using the nickname only he called me. I think it's time I told you everything. Before he could continue, the office door burst open. And there they were. My father, my mother, and Aiden Whitman. The shock in their eyes was palpable. My father's face was turning that deep, familiar shade of purple. Aiden's jaw hung open. My mother froze, hand clutching her purse as if it were a lifeline. What is the meaning of this? My father barked. Why are you in the CEO's office, Mateo? Mateo straightened his tie, calm, deliberate. Actually, Mr. Harrington, I am the CEO, founder and chief executive officer of Carter Tech Innovations. Silence. My mother staggered back, grasping a chair for support. Aiden looked as if he had been caught in a bad dream. And my father, he was speechless. For the first time in my life, my father didn't have the words, the strategy, or the fury ready. Mateo continued, taking my hand. I do own a chain of auto repair shops. That's where you met me. But Carter Tech Innovations is my main company. We're pioneering sustainable automotive technology, specifically revolutionary electric vehicle batteries. Those late nights at the garage, we were finalizing a prototype that's changing the industry. I felt my head spin. But why didn't you tell me? I whispered. He smiled, brushing a damp strand of hair from my face. Because I needed to be sure. When we met, you didn't care about money or status. You loved me for who I was, not what I could become. And that means more to me than billions. My father's eyes darted between us, then finally landed on the city's skyline outside the window. Slowly, he muttered, that company, the one the Harringtons have tried to break into for years. That's you. Mateo's expression was calm, almost indulgent. Yes. And now, thanks to our connection, well, We can discuss potential partnerships if you're interested." My mother stepped forward, tears welling. "Peyton, we were wrong. We see that now. Please come home." I looked at her, then at Mateo. I realized that home wasn't a mansion. Home wasn't a trust fund or a name on a building. Home was this partnership, this love, this life we had built from scratch. "I am home, Mom," I said quietly, "but if you want to be part of our lives, you'll have to accept us on our terms. No manipulation, no control, just love." My father turned, chest tight, as if swallowing something bitter. And Aiden, he quietly slunk away, leaving the room like a ghost of the life I'd left behind. Mateo wrapped his arm around me, grounding me in the moment. For the first time, I understood fully what he had meant all those months ago. Love, courage, and authenticity trump everything. Wealth, privilege, and appearances mean nothing without heart. And in that office, with the city stretched out below, I realized I had won something far greater than billions. I had won my life back. The days after the office revelation were surreal, like waking up from a dream I never wanted to end. My parents kept their distance at first, unsure how to navigate a daughter who refused to be controlled, and who had, in a single moment, redefined the power dynamic they had spent decades building. Aiden faded completely from my life, a reminder of a past that no longer held any sway over me. Mateo and I moved, but not into a mansion or penthouse. Instead, we chose a modest home that we picked together, a place that reflected us, not status or wealth, but comfort, warmth, and freedom. It had a small garden, space for a garage, and plenty of room for laughter. That apartment I had once cursed now felt like a stepping stone, a reminder of the life we had fought to claim as our own. I joined Mateo at Carter Tech Innovations, not as a figurehead, but as head of the company's charitable foundation. Using our resources, we could help young entrepreneurs who, like Mateo once, were overlooked, underestimated, or struggling to be seen. There was something quietly powerful in giving others the opportunities we had worked so hard to create for ourselves. Mateo kept his garage, though. He loved teaching kids how to work with their hands, how to solve problems, and how to take pride in their own labor. He said it grounded him, reminded him of where he had started. And for me, it was a constant lesson. Life wasn't measured by bank accounts or titles. Happiness was measured by love, trust, and shared purpose. My parents slowly began to adjust. My mother, ever emotional, made tentative visits, offering small gestures of reconciliation and care. My father, pragmatic as ever, began to respect Mateo, not just for his genius, but for the man who had made me happy and supported me when I needed strength the most. They never fully abandoned their old ways, but the shift in their perspective reminded me that even people deeply set in their ways can learn humility. Looking back, I realized the months of struggle, the budgeting, the small apartment, the doubts, were not just obstacles. They were the very lessons that made our love unshakable. We had built a life from scratch, learned to weather challenges together, and discovered joy in the simplest moments. Sometimes, late at night, we would drive past our old apartment or grab takeout from the little Thai place where it all began. Mateo would look at me with that same smile I had fallen in love with, the one that had never changed despite everything. "Remember this?" he'd say, pointing to the neon glow of the garage sign. "I do," I'd laugh, squeezing his hand. How could I forget? And in those moments, I understood fully what Mateo had meant when he first told me, life's too short to do something just because it looks good on paper. I had traded privilege and expectation for authenticity, risk, and love. And in doing so, I had gained everything that truly mattered. We were Peyton and Mateo, a woman who had walked away from control and a man who had built an empire quietly, patiently, and honestly. We had learned that love doesn't care about bank accounts, company names, or social status. It cares about who you are when everything else is stripped away. And in the end, we had everything: freedom, respect, purpose, and a love that was completely, utterly ours. That I realized was worth far more than any mansion, any trust fund, or any title in the world. Thank you for walking this path with me. Every story reminds us that courage, love, and authenticity often hide behind the struggles we face. If this story touched you, stay with us, where every story reveals another truth of the human heart. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so more stories like this can reach the people who need them most.